Sashi Puki Juxing Meto Chang Rirab Ling Chi Yente Yampadi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Ulwari Drokun Namda Shingla Drupar Sho Nidam Guru Ratnamanda Kamyatayami Sangye Chidam Soki Choknam La Panchu Bardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Chinyen Kipe Sanam Ki Droga Panchir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chidam Soki Choknam Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chidam Soki Choknam La Janchu Bardu Daki Kyapsu Chi Daki Chinyen Gipe Sonam Ki Droha Panchir Sangye Drupar Sho These class 5 minutes.
No, just 5.
Just 5.
How did that feel?
What's better?
No, your meditation.
Oh. I was like, interesting.
Interesting how.
Just I was able to keep a sense of wonder.
You were?
What I was trying to do.
I'm sorry, you were.
Able to keep a sense of wonder
Uh-huh.
about what I was trying to do.
How is that for other people?
I actually struggled a little bit with the quiet.
Yeah.
That's much more quiet than it normally is.
Yeah.
The outside noise wasn't here. And
Yeah.
I kind of use that to keep present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was actually thinking it would be nice if the three jewels just opened up this space in the morning so that it's like a Ashtanga where you can just come in and like an ashram. You can just come in and do your meditations and come and go. Just to get a sense of what it feels like to be in a space and if that's even possible. Thought it'd be nice just to get a temperature of how it feels for you to individually hold space for yourself, and also what it's like to be with other practitioners in a room and see how your meditations go. So good, nice, something different. It's so often that we always have someone leading, and it's self-practice is not always something that has to be done alone in a room. The only other times you ever usually get the opportunity is when you're on a group retreat. No reason why you can't do it here, right? Okay. I know. Armando is really displeased with this. So fussy with it. Okay, let's just divide you guys up into two groups and then look at homework. Or we can, yeah, two groups and do it as a quiz, and I'll kind of scroll through it as I hear you guys chit-chatting.
So, Jee, do you not see that on your screen?
No, this one I'm not. This is like my second monitor. So.
You can set it up to mirror.
No, it's okay. No problem. So just divide the room in half. We've talked so much about valid and correct perceptions. If you guys don't know it by this point, I don't know if I should be writing down the questions. Oh, yeah, I know how to write questions.
You're right.
This is special object towards which only Buddha has.
So two parts of this object.
I don't know is and how things are
Well, the ultimate reality.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to confirm.
Two ways to see.
Look at my notes.
Oh, it's not mine.
2,000.
Results in reality, man.
Sometimes used with the reference.
Describe the two parts of this object.
So all the different states that.
Oh,
This is so weird.
To see both at the same time.
This is crappy. Yeah, you have, and it's paging for it.
it's like the part that you have to be enlightened in order to see it.
That's what it says.
Cool.
You'd like to see it. We got like two of those, there's like three, we got like three references for particular object.
That's a different question.
I have a half idea of what's different.
Describe the two parts of this object.
Okay, so the Tibetan is G and K for the totality of all objects.
Well, whatever it is, it has something to do with entities.
Oh, yeah, extra credit.
Since everything has to do with entities.
And then G.
What?
G, well, technically G.
But I don't think that's what they're asking.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, that's typically getting the dollars.
What are the three main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about the very deep teachings he gave?
Like, was there one like, the subtle workers of karma?
See if you remember.
As
I'm just
one
curious.
of
I'm
these
just asking you
methods,
about
I think
it.
that you could
Yeah.
perceive in terms of the teaching. Like, there's another one, it's like something about the phenomenon.
We're not done with the first question. Sometimes it's done on direct perception and inductive.
Yeah.
Right.
According to
Yeah.
Normal person
The
doesn't
totality of
describe
all
these
senses.
things.
Meanings on.
Yeah.
That the one seeing present past and future, see the totality of us. That's conventional.
That's what part of this realization to the
Right, so
creator.
I have three
The
about.
first three others of that.
There's also the figure and versus the statements, which are some of the three questions.
I mean, it couldn't be
emptiness because.
What was the
Is there-
intent of the statement?
Third question, G.
Does it contradict obvious direct
You have to be
perception?
Yeah, we said that.
On the way
Is there a
to it.
compelling need?
Right, right, so
Right.
it's like change.
Only after that.
So it's fully developed.
It's like a different, I don't know.
Or the duration.
Yeah.
maybe you were just.
Not
You're
sure.
ahead of it.
No.
Pernicious, yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
that's
describing the three gospels for
That's the thing about your mother.
like kill your lunch.
What was the true?
That's literal.
Never kill your mother?
That's literal, not figurative.
Does it contradict?
It's
Three
what
rules to determine, right? Yeah, three ground rules, three rules. One, Gongxi, thought basis, one was the true
No.
intent of the statement. Two,
Similar,
the
but
reality of the way things are contradict, does it contradict obvious direct
is there a
reality?
compelling need to make a statement to achieve?
Your last move.
Oh.
Yeah, new
Oh,
new
like
jobs.
two
The third one is compelling need,
Yeah.
great purpose served. Is there a compelling need to make the statement to achieve a certain purpose?
Vandalized.
What is the true intent of the statement? Yeah, we joking or we actually trying to explain something? The second one is reality, the way things are, is contradiction. Does it contradict obvious realities or perceptions?
Figurative statement.
Has it contradicted anything else?
So which is figurative, which is literal?
But these are the ways to determine whether or not to take something. So I think these are literal ground rules
Okay.
of explaining how to.
Okay, one discovery seems to be grounded
And this third one is,
in the Buddha.
Is there compelling need to make a statement to achieve a certain purpose? Kind of like the first one.
So what'd you guys say?
I don't know, I feel like I'm thinking because between the two sets. He's apparently.
Ground is
Yeah,
to
you
test
have
if
to-
something is a valid.
I remember that from that course.
This
What was
is
one of the
one
topics
of the
statement?
Who
Yeah,
turned?
like a figurative versus a literal statement.
So the true intent was
Yeah.
valid perception is what they would
The airtight
There's
reason.
a pattern and method, right?
Oh,
Then we're
Go for the seminar,
Does it contradict obvious
See my here for the one who turned correct.
direct
He had
reality?
afflictions before he had problems, and enlightened before there was a path. That's all I had for my words.
Yeah.
So name to purpose of
like I said, there's a pattern and method.
All right, I see. Afflictions, but a path out of it.
One question is,
There's no way to make a statement to achieve a certain purpose.
Yeah, I guess for the quote of who turned, yeah, it's like you could have afflictions, you could have problems, but there's a way out of it. So someone who turned, someone who's overcome those afflictions based on being on a path.
Yes.
Contradicts to reality.
Oh, this would be like,
Perception.
we could see like direct
Compelling.
perception,
perception.
deductive reasoning.
Alright, for,
I don't know, it was,
The one we just had, not this
I'm
one.
looking at this one.
So this one is for normal person, so it has to be deductive reasoning. It's not the Buddha. It's your Buddha, you directly experience it.
yeah.
Is it one that he always speaks to?
He was turned.
It's how do you know that?
Oh, yeah, this is like a scriptural reference,
I wasn't, and he was self-existent.
right? Like, oh, it's in scripture, then that's one of the ways you can.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know, I'm suggesting it, I'm not sure.
Right.
But it seems like one of those, yeah. Yeah. So one would be like
Yeah.
through knowledge, so.
That is a pretty much person.
It will be out there like.
Yeah. Then we take through logic.
Can we see formally?
Probably through logic, through statement of someone who thinks he would be an authority
Mhm.
in scripture.
Two sentences.
Okay, I feel like one of them was the path.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but he wasn't always.
You like my notes, like I'm missing a bunch.
Your kinds of people losing it. Biological reasoning, human authority, and based on
Or A, what data set?
this was
Isn't
Well,
turned and
so you're not,
was-
320.
yeah. Someone did become.
So there's 3 maybe.
Which part?
One person did.
What question? Number 2?
Yeah.
3?
What from what class?
Number 2 was from the first one of the 2.
First class?
It was 4A.
4A, not 3.
Self-existent, just desire to study.
This is the first class. You're looking at.
Just 4?
What are the 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about the very deep teachings he gave? Okay. We'll go over it. Wait, yeah. Are you guys, how far are you guys?
We're
We're
done.
not,
We're done.
Yeah,
You guys
we're
done?
too.
You guys?
No answers, it's still done.
Right. You got good ball.
What?
Okay. Let's go over it. first question was, the term valid perception, the term valid or correct perception, sema or pramana, which we've been talking about for the last 2 months, is sometimes used with reference not to a state of mind, but to the Buddha himself. This is because of the special object towards which only a Buddha has correct perception. Describe the 2 parts of this object. Who remembers this question or the answer? What are the 2 parts that we talked about that a Buddha can see using when they look at an object? 2 different ways.
So they can see the conventional nature, the totality of
Yeah,
the object,
yeah.
and then they can also see the ultimate reality, how things exist.
Right, exactly, right? So we got that, right? We get that. 2 different ways. You can see the conventional nature, you see the vase in its conventional form, or you see the ultimate nature, right? Which is the emptiness of the vase, right? Makes sense, right? Cool.
What class was that part of?
I think it was 4A. We talked about totality and as they really are.
Right after CQ.
G, Nepai, Chu, we talked about.
After CQ, CQs.
Sorry, I'm looking for my mouse. Here we go. Okay. Number 2, question. What are the 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about the very deep teachings he gave? So we talked about 3 different ways that you can start to decide, right? When the teacher is talking about something that is deeply subtle, right? Deeply hidden, I think it's the term that we use. How do you determine that that's even true? Who remembers that?
This is the kill your mother and father.
Yes. Well, that was one of the examples that we had, but there were 3 very specific ways that we talked about of how you could determine that. Like, how do we know, right?
He said, what was it?
Can't be contradicted
Can't be contradicted.
by a valid perception you're having.
There's a compelling reason to make the statement.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then the intent of the statement as well?
There's intent of the statement. Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought this one was
Well,
tight reasoning.
We said airtight reasoning. There wasn't no intent. I'm sorry, I just nodded, but that's not true. Yeah, the first one was that you can't be disproved. There's some sort of valid perception that you've had that can't disprove it. The second one is that there's some sort of there is airtight reasoning. And there was a third one that was a bit controversial, but
Oh, about the contradiction.
Yeah. it's not inconsistent, right? Right. 3 different ways that you look at it. This is super important, by the way, guys. I mean, I think that, it sounds like these are 3 lists, but honestly, there are so many times that we, as students, get exposed to Dharma. We're exposed to a lot of things that people say, and I don't know, you're in a crowd that feels good, teacher feels good, the vibe is good, and you'll just listen to it and think that that's actually true. And you shouldn't. There's so many different things out there that are happening, especially in teachings, where if it's not airtight, if you don't have the reasoning, if you don't understand, if there are inconsistencies that aren't making sense, like someone is talking about, I don't know, I was just talking to someone who was talking about how they don't believe in karma, but they believe in reincarnation. And I'm like, huh? But how do you even reincarnate? Based on what? How do you reincarnate if you don't believe in karma? How does that make sense? And they just didn't have the knowledge to back it up. And so at least the fact that with even these teachings, that to understand the basic fundamentals of asking those questions. So and also just basic things like valid perceptions. If you've had a valid perception of something, or there are even times where a lot of people will be like, whatever, I don't believe in karma. It's like, well, have you had a valid perception that it doesn't exist? You know, if you haven't, then it's worth, then you move on to the second point. Like, you can't just by your gut decide that you don't believe in something. So the thing about all these processes are put in place as checkpoints to make sure that you're looking at them, you're really making sure, it's really also to protect yourself so that you have knowledge and wisdom that's being given to you that's really has foundation. Okay. Number 3 says, can someone read that?
Name and describe briefly the 3 ground rules for interpreting the Buddha. That is, for deciding that something which Lord Buddha said was meant only figuratively and not literally.
Right. So we talked about figurative and not literal, right? And that was a do not kill, or no, it wasn't do not, it was kill. Kill your mother and father. Like, okay, is that true? So can you imagine there's someone who is considered omniscient that's telling you now, like, great, next steps, you guys, this week, what you're going to do is go and kill your mother and father. How do you know that that's literal or figurative, right? What does that mean? I gave the example, I think 2 weeks ago, of a teacher saying to me, you should go smoke pot. Is that figurative or is that literal? You know, what does that mean? So we had 3 different things that we talked about. What were they?
What's the intent?
What's the intent?
Uh-huh.
First one was what was the true intent of the statement?
Yeah.
The second one was the reality, the way things are to contradict. Does it contradict obvious direct realities or perceptions?
Mm-hmm.
And the third one would be, is there a compelling need to make the statement to achieve a certain purpose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And really this question, I'm not messing with you. It's worth really keeping in your back pocket. Like, keep a note card of it. Because you'll get into situations with teachers and you're like, what the hell are they talking about? I don't understand. This is so not making sense. And it does help to have that knowledge, I think. You know, where is it consistent? Where is it not? Are there contradictions? Can you try to decipher and see? And sometimes it's a long game. Sometimes you have to be around for quite some time. I mean, we've talked about this in course 1. How many years do they say in the monasteries to wait till you find a teacher?
12.
How many years?
12.
I remember as 12. It might be 13. I remember as 12 as well. 12 years, that's a long time. You know, that's no joke. So, and there's a reason for that. So you wait, you know, you can wait. You don't need to rush into things. And then also getting a sense of the need, right? Can you start to see what the need is? Teachers will say one thing to one student and say something totally different to the other. Then the 2 students meet and it's like, well, the teacher told me to do this. And it's like, what are you talking about? The teacher told me to do this. And it's based on, if you have the right teacher, it's going to be based on capacity. You know, one student will be like, yes, go smoke weed. The other, no, absolutely not. Like, you know, no drinking, no sex, no, you know, no anything. I mean, it will depend on the capacity based on what the students are in need of. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, done. Oh, was there 4? Oh, no, sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. Name 2 purposes why Master Dignaga stated the words, who turned in the opening lines of his work, the Compendium of Valid Perception. Who remembers this one? The 2 purposes. There was like that statement that we had that was very long, and there was just 2 main points to it.
It's so that we know that Buddha was not self-existently a Buddha, and that if he wasn't self-existently a Buddha, that means there must be some way to become enlightened.
Great, yeah. So the idea that turned, meaning that he wasn't a Buddha before, right? Became one, so that it, right. And so if he indeed turned, wasn't, and then became, there was a path to become. Great, nice. Okay, very good. Okay. Okay, today's class, we're gonna go a little bit more into omniscience. Can you say takpa? Means unchanging. Sometimes it's translated as permanent. Geshe Michael likes the word unchanging in particular because permanent in the English language means something different slightly. So it's subtle. So we're going to go with unchanging. And can you say mi takpa? That's changing. So we have takpa and mi takpa, changing and unchanging. Okay, I'm going to try to see if I can explain this all to you and why it matters to the best of my ability. So bear with me. We talked, I think about, I think it was class 2 or 3, about whether or not an omniscience being, mind, is changing or unchanging. Do you remember that? And what do we land on?
Changing,
And why?
because things are changing, objects are changing.
So a omniscience being's mind is changing because the objects are changing. So you're saying that if an omniscience being mind is observing something changing, as the thing changes, the being's mind is also changing, right?
So, I think we were using the word fresh.
Yes, that's right. We also had that conversation, right? That it's a fresh perspective. So as it's fresh, even though that being is omniscient, that the mind is still changing, right? So if the object is unchanging, is the omniscient being's mind unchanging in that moment too?
No.
It's still changing.
Yeah.
Why?
Still perceiving something.
Yeah, moment to moment, right? Still a fresh perspective. Okay, great. This is going to be so much easier. Amazing. So the changing and unchanging thing, actually, let me just see what my next, bear with me. Sorry, 1 second. Actually, we'll just stay here. Okay. The unchanging and changing component of an omniscience mind The unchanging and changing part of an omniscience mind is important to take a look at because there was in the Sharvaka and the Samkhya school a statement saying that the world was created by an omniscient being, an omniscient, unchanging being was the statement, right? And so then what Master Dharmakirti started to address is this in fact logically true? Can we prove this to be untrue? Can the world be created by an omniscient being who is unchanging?
No, because then we, wait. And the answer is no. Because then everything would be unchanging. First off, right? And this is what I got.
I never thought of it that way. But that if an omniscient being was unchanging, would everything that's created then therefore be unchanging?
From like you said before.
I suppose that would be true. Although that's not what Master Dharmakirti said. But that would possibly be true, yeah. What he did say is not that. I don't know why though, which is actually a good question. Let me think about that.
Well, wouldn't you have to, if you are an unchanging thing, in order to create the thing, you would need a cause.
Right, okay, so that's interesting, right? What Master Dharmakirti says is it's not possible for this, if there's a being out there creating things that are, well, actually, he did tie it into what you just said, actually, a little bit. If there's an omniscient being out there because things are changing and there's an omniscient being, right? it's not possible that the omniscient being can have an unchanging mind because things are changing, which is actually the flip of what you're saying, right? If it were true that the omniscient being was unchanging, all things would be changing. And because that they're using the term he for now, okay, or in the scripture, because he is changing, what that means is that if something is indeed changing, it has to be caused. And if indeed that's true, because if he does need to be caused, then he himself was caused. And so there was a time before that he had existed to be caused into what he is now. And therefore, there's not an omniscient being that just existed at all times, no matter what, endlessly, and just always was there. Does that make sense?
Can you just say it again?
So
Because the idea is that, like, there's a God, for instance, right? God existed all the time. There was never a time before God. God just was there, right? I mean, that's a philosophy that's out there, right? And what Master Dharmakirti is saying, it's impossible for that being who's omniscient to exist at all times, because if their mind is in fact changing, because they're observing the world changing, things are changing, then, and not unchanged. So he's not unchanging. We've eliminated that. It's changing. And if indeed he is changing, then his thoughts are caused. And if that's indeed true, you apply that to his existence, then he must also be caused. So that means that there was a time where he did not exist. He had to be caused into the existence.
How do we know
Because
that?
everything that's changing has a cause.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that the omniscient being is perceiving the object they've created as changing?
Well, that's what we were just talking about, right? Is that when we just went from the very beginning of, is an omniscient mind, a being's mind, is it a changing mind or an unchanging mind? And we're saying that if you're having a fresh perspective and as things change, your mind is also changing. Therefore, the omniscient being's mind would be changing.
If they're perceiving a changing object. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we know they're perceiving a changing object?
Because things are changing in the world that we see today. There's a constant change. Things do change. It's not unchanging. It's not static.
But you're looking at that from a linear perspective. An omniscient being doesn't necessarily look at it from a linear perspective.
Right.
You could also say that they're not having fresh, direct perceptions repeatedly because they're only having it once.
Right, which we talked about.
Possible
Yes.
that these long lives that we lead
Yes.
are
Yeah.
just a blip.
Yeah.
And then an omniscient being's mind.
Yeah.
So that's all there is.
That's also possible. But based on the logic that we've been speaking about, right? So logic is always built on a certain foundation. And if we're saying in the very beginning that we talked about the idea of fresh perspective, right? If we are saying and saying that that is the foundation, that it is a fresh perspective, then we build on that case. So it has to be a build. Does that make sense? That's the logic behind it. That's Dharmakirti's logic. If indeed things are changed, yes.
So if things are changing, but if they see everything all at once, past, present, future, then I mean, it's almost like every second for them in linear terms, they've already seen it. It's the same. It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Say right now. And
Sure.
Everything we do yesterday and tomorrow. So their perception is really how's it changing if they can see everything at once at the same.
Right.
You know, it's
Right.
not really.
But if you're having the perception of nominal and ultimate reality at the same time, they would have to also see for reality which change occurs.
And we also said that every time they're having that perception, even though they do see all three things at the same time in a moment, that it is still considered a fresh perspective, right? It's a fresh perception, I should say, not perspective. And if it's fresh and they're seeing it freshly in that state, but they're defining other things. There is a change to that as things are progressing. There is a fresh take of it.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably much quicker than even the way that he timed things out. The thing that's tricky about this too is like, it's hard to have a conceptual conversation about omniscience if you don't have it, because the perspective, I mean, the dimensions are so completely different.
I have a question. If something is unchanging, meaning that it doesn't progress in stages, there would not be a past, present, or future. Right? Would it be no changing? It's fixed.
There's no cause.
That's fixed.
Yeah.
There's no cause,
There's
it's
no
just
cause.
fixed.
But that's not us, that's that, whatever that is.
Wait, so there's a school that believes that?
There's lots of schools that believe aspects of that, for sure. I mean, even the concept of God, right, is it's fixed. He's fixed, it's always been there.
But it's also semantics, because to me, emptiness is another term for God. So it's how you define it.
Yes, yeah, sure. Yeah, that also works too. Yeah, that's the other thing too, right, is that the more you practice and the deeper you go, you will start to realize it is semantics, a lot of it. And that's why we talk about Tibetan Buddhism. Yes, there is the mind of the practice, the mental component, but it is a practice, it's a feeling state. And on top of it, right, we're also hearing an interpretation of it into English, you know, from its original language. So you're also getting that as well, right? And it's one of those things, like, that's why, yeah, I can't remember who asked, I think maybe you might have asked at one point, like, whether teachers talk about emptiness out loud, you know, and most don't, a majority don't, and there's a reason for that. Because when you have a direct perception of emptiness, it's like, how do you talk about colors to someone that's never seen colors before? You know, how would you do that? I mean, you can try, but imagine, right? It's like the same thing. So you can only conceptually understand it until you've experienced it. And the deeper your experience goes, and the more familiar you become with this information and understand also for yourself where you're at, when you start to listen to the content, you start to listen to teachings, different things will resonate with you and different things you'll understand. And sometimes it will be semantics. There'll be some teachers that use certain words and language that makes more sense to you and in your form today and capacity, and others that say it in a different way, you know? And so for me, that's something that is important of, as I'm even with my own spiritual path, the importance of really like listen. I do think it's important, some teachers will disagree, but I do think it's important to be out there and listening to teachings all the time. You know, like I'm not a big fan of just listening to all different types of lineages until you know your foundation, but within the foundations that you are interested in, to hear the different iterations and expressions are really important, because you might hear it, you might have to hear it a bazillion times, really, until it finally hits and someone says it in a specific way, at a specific time, at a specific moment, where it makes sense to you. And then you'll be like going back to the other teachers and like, oh, they were saying the same thing the whole time. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. Yeah, like everyone's nodding their head because you've had those experiences, right? Where that's happened. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we're going to wrap up. Yeah, I mean, well, we have a few more, but. heat. Really? That's the feeling that I want to give you, but okay. It's like, you mean fire under your ass? And she's like, yeah, but it's like heat.
Is it Kundalini awakening?
I know, right? It is. So,
Gee, your mic.
okay. All right, okay, here we go. All right, can you say long jump? Long jump. Again, long jump. Long jump. So long jump is things you should take up. Quote, or pruns, pure sign of existence. And can you say dorja?
Dorja.
Can you say dorja again?
Dorja.
So dorja are things you should abandon. So, you know, when we think about, well, I don't know about we, but most times when people think about omniscience, they think like, oh, it must be so amazing to know all things that are happening at all given times, every little detail, you know. I think the example that was given in this teaching when I took the class was, you know, to know like every single specimen that's in the ocean, like down to the T. And I don't know, Armando and I have been watching Animal Planet, the second version, the second iteration of it. It's on Netflix if you're interested. Anyway, it's fascinating to watch, I have to say, as a Dharma student, because you really realize what the animal realm is like. I mean, it's so scary. It's so, and actually we started watching it because I realized when I watch it, in a way, it gives me great humility and gratitude for being human, because these lives these animals have, it sucks. I mean, it's not great. And, you know, they live in some amazing places, but aside from that, it's, you know, always being afraid of being hunted, constantly stressed out. They look so stressed out of their life at risk. Even mating is quite exhausting for most of them. It doesn't seem great. So I've been watching it, and it's been nice to be able to end my day after, especially when I have really long days. It feels like, you know, this was a really hard day, and I watch these animals and I think, well, man, your life is not remotely, like it's so much worse than mine. And so anyway, that's just like a segue. But when I learned this class, I remember my teacher, John Stovall, who has been here, had said, you know, most people think that omniscience is about knowing every minutia, every detail of things. And what they're saying, what Dharma Kirti is saying, is that that's actually not the point. The point of being able to be omniscient is to know perfectly what to give up, right, and what to take up, right? So it's the Longshan Dorja. It's knowing what you should be doing, what you should participate in, perfectly. That makes sense. And it's knowing what you need to abandon. And your teacher that you take should be able to help you with that. You should see a teacher that emanates that philosophy, that knows what to take up, what to give up, when to do it, how to do it, okay? The biggest challenge of Longja and Dorja for beings that aren't omniscient is not so much activities that you participate in. It's not like do this hobby versus not, take this job versus not, you know. It's going to be your afflictions, right? It's always an affliction-based thing, right? So getting a sense of what are the afflictions that you want to give up is a big part of the give up. When we say give up, it's not like I don't know, video games. I mean, I don't know, maybe it could be video games, I don't know, but it could be like, but sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you, I wasn't meaning to. But it could, but really it's about what are the afflictions that you have that are really the give up component, and what makes sense. And it's always going to be based on what again, it does really refer back to this perfections. It refers back to what is your ultimate goal that you want to have. And the more you practice too, and I think, Sarah, you had maybe mentioned this back a few classes ago, but the more you practice, it gets easier to make decisions. Or maybe, no, you said it. I don't know, it's a woman that said it. But it makes it easier to decide. And it also makes it easier to decide who you want to be friends with. That makes sense, right? What activities you engage in, what time you go to bed, what jobs you decide to take, you know, what kind of partners you want to have, and why you want to have those kinds of partners. It makes it a lot easier for these decisions. And so I find that for myself, when I'm more afflicted, it's because I'm not on the cushion enough or I'm not deepening my practice enough. I'm usually less afflicted when I'm practicing more. You know, I'm eating less sugar for one. I don't emotionally eat. I'm a huge emotional eater, so I won't do that. I usually go to bed earlier. Like my physical life shifts, right, as well as my mental health, and also my friends start to shift. And it's not like I go through a checklist. It just makes sense. Like there are priorities I have in place. It's the same thing that parents will say a lot of the times when they have children. Like there's certain priorities that you just give up because you know that raising your child or your children is a top priority. And so there are certain types of engagements you just have to let go of, right? And lifestyle choices that you just have to not participate in because it doesn't make sense. So in that way, similar to that. So if you're afflicted, get on the cushion. So there's a statement here, omniscience is a state of mind having correct perception towards everything. That's really the main goal of omniscience.
I would just say semantically, I wouldn't use the word omniscient because it means
Yeah.
the all-knowing.
Yeah,
And that's not all-knowing, that's having a correct perception. So I'd say perfectly skillful wisdom.
yeah. That's nice too, yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
So that would fit better for me
Yeah.
for this definition.
Yeah, sure.
It's also
Yeah, and
functional.
you know, and actually that's a good point. Like there are, in the Dharma, at least from my exposure, different teachers use the language differently. Some are more poetic than others. Some are just really dry. I mean, really, it's like, seriously, could you be more dry? Some, and so you'll start to get a sense of that too, of how they decide to express their work, their teachings with their language and what starts to resonate with you. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Can you say Goklam?
Goklam.
Dukun.
Dukun.
Goklam?
Goklam.
Dukun.
Dukun.
Okay, so Goklam and Dukun are really the four noble truths. Gok is actually, I'll start with Duk actually. Duk is the first noble truth. It actually comes from Dukun Dhamma. It's the noble truth of suffering. The second one is Kun, which is really comes from Kunjung Denpa, which is the source of all our suffering. It's really the basis of mental afflictions and ignorance. The third noble truth is Gok. It comes from Gokten. And it means cessation. It means that there's a cessation particular to suffering. There's an end to suffering. And the fourth noble truth is long. Long, which we've heard, right? Long run. What does long mean?
Steps.
Path. It was like long run. Yeah, path, right? That there's a path to accomplish that. Which is really the path to understanding emptiness and ultimate reality. So we have four noble truths that are here, that are also called Arya truths. What are the four noble truths or the four Arya truths? You don't remember.
First one is that there is suffering. The second is that there is a cause for suffering. The third is that if there's a cause, there's an end to suffering, and then the fourth is a path.
Nice, exactly, right? And so when do you experience that?
After you see that, yes,
So after the direct perception of emptiness is when you have, that's why you hear it as 4 noble truths or as well as 4 Arya truths. That after you have the direct perception of emptiness is when you'll really understand these 4 truths that are up here on the slide. And so, yes.
But we know it now to some degree, or we wouldn't be on the path.
Exactly. So actually, that's a great, yes, very good. So the point then the Buddha starts to make is, or Master Dharmakirti starts to make is that the first noble truth of suffering. Like, we've all had a valid perception of that, I mean, I hope so. I hope you've all been in it with me too, right? We've all had that valid perception. And that gives you, or any practitioner, a sense of, okay, maybe there is some validity to this, and it helps you segue into understanding then what are the other noble truths. That's what gets you into understanding the other practices. If that first one didn't even work, if you didn't have a valid perception of that, you're like, that's not true, life isn't suffering.
Why bother?
Why bother, right? Why bother? And so a lot of the times when people come to Dharma too, I mean, we hear, people think, oh, Dharma, Buddhism is all about like peace and, compassion, love everyone. And when you hear like life is suffering, you're just like, what? That's not what I thought Buddhism is. And actually that is a big foundation of it, right? It's a big part of it. That we're saying life is suffering, there is some sorrow, it does not end. We find different ways where we think that we can find happiness, right? So much of refuge, right, or renunciation is about acknowledging the fact that life has suffering, right? It's not like in the modern world, we're always trying to find a way to make ourselves happier through like, and I always hear like work-life balance. Work-life balance is not going to make you happier. It's not. Right? I mean, it's not. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago, and they're just like, what do you think? Like, how do you create work-life balance? And it's like, I don't believe in that. That's ridiculous. Don't be crazy. You're setting yourself up for so much misery. Right? We always have these mechanisms of how we think happiness is being achieved. And what the first proof really that starts with the Buddha being omniscient, when the Buddha says life is suffering. We all know deep down inside, whether it needs to even be that deep or not, that in fact that's true. And that's why we're here, to figure out a way to be able to understand how to stop it, what's the path to it, and to have ultimate freedom. Right? Yeah. And until you can even acknowledge the fact that that may be true, then it's hard to even have a spiritual practice. It takes that time, right? So for people to even come to Dharma, it takes usually a certain point in your life where you've hit a certain wall, right? Where you realize that whatever mechanism that you had in place has not been working, right? And that's what renunciation is about, right? Okay. So this is not on your homework, but it's important, as my teacher said, it's important for this life and all your future lives. So we'll go through it. Can you say Lily?
Lily.
Jigten?
Jigten.
Natso.
Natso.
Ki Deni.
Ki Deni.
Senpadam.
Senpadam.
Deje.
Deje.
Lily.
Lily.
Jigten.
Jigten.
Natso.
Natso.
Ki Deni.
Ki Deni.
Senpadam.
Senpadam.
Deje.
Deje.
So Lele is karma from. Jigten is the world. Natsok is all the various ones. Ki is come. Deni is that. Ni is karma. Senpa, movement of the mind. Dong is and Deje is what it makes you do or say. So simple. All the various worlds come from karma. Karma is a movement of the mind and what inspires us to do or say. We've talked about karma being the movement of the mind, right? So karma isn't necessarily just the actual action, it's the thoughts and the intention. So as you do something, that's why it's so important to have the thoughts behind it. I have a very close friend of mine who I think struggles with this because sometimes he'll do something, but his intention is not necessarily reflected in his action, and he gets frustrated because he's like, that's not what I was intending, you know, I was trying to help you do X, Y, and Z, but it actually created more obstacles to be able to get my work done. That's okay. It's okay. Sometimes your intentions may not necessarily be perceived the way that you'd like it to be, or get credit for the way that you'd like it to be considered. That's okay. It will come back to you in the way it needs to. So just be patient, hang tight. But the intention does matter. Yeah, it does matter.
One of my teachers made the statement, look, you've heard everybody. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
What was it?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So he just rephrased that in Dharma terms to the road to Nirvana is paved with skilled intentions.
Yeah.
And so good intentions is not sufficient, you need to have skilled
Yeah,
intentions.
it's true. Yeah. I had
So I'm just saying your friend doesn't have skilled intentions
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
And that might be an important,
it might be, yeah, that's true.
they may have, he sounds like he has great good intentions,
Yes,
but not
but
skilled
skilled
intentions, so he doesn't know what real good is.
Maybe that's something I'll say to him.
Because when I read that story, the teacher said, it's nice, it's a few pages, it made a deep imprint on me, like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a helpful way to work with this.
Totally. It's actually like a very tactical way to start looking at it.
Right, that's one of his phrases, the
Yeah.
tactic.
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful. Yeah. Yeah, it's not just the intentions that can always help. I mean, having the skill and fusing those two together is helpful. Yeah. Because you know people who are also have actions that look like it's generous, for instance, but their intentions aren't there. Like you can see that when it's inauthentic. But yeah, the skilled intention. That's it, guys. We have a little bit of time. So I'm happy to open it up to this discussion, check-in to see how everyone's doing with practice. If you'd like, if not, we can close the room.
Can we talk about karma?
Sure. I mean, it's a good place to do it.
Yeah. I think I think I still kind of struggle with accepting karma. Like, I think I accept it right now to use it as like, okay, and this, like, to apply these teachings, like, if I accept karma's definition, how would it operate, you know?
Yeah.
But, okay, so karma is the movement of the mind. Could you expand on, like, the explanation of that?
It's your karmic seeds are planted not just through your actions, but through every thought.
So are our minds, like, if we've had past lives, present, future lives, where is, like, where does the karma exist? You know, like, is the mind this metaphysical thing, just as your karma is, that just kind of,
Like, where's your karma bank?
yeah, like, where's this bank of seeds? And I've heard of beginningless time. I'm like, whoa, when did it start?
Yeah.
Like, how, like, to me, sometimes karma operates as this convenient explanation of, like, hey, your life is the way it is because of something that you just did in this
Yeah.
present life
Yeah.
or past life.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah,
like,
because when something happens to you, like when something shitty happens to you, someone's like, well, that's your karma, and you just want to give them the middle finger. You're like, that's really great and not helpful at all. Right. Mhm. I mean, we do have, the next course is karma.
cool.
So you get 12 plus weeks of karma.
Right.
But what I will say, and anyone else can also contribute to this, obviously, is I have heard teachings saying that even, and I don't know where it was, so I can't remember, so I can't quote it, but I'm saying that even the Buddha did not understand the complexity of karma. emptiness, sure. But I have heard teachings of saying that the Buddha himself didn't even know the complexity of it. So it's not something that even I will just to set up your expectations. You will take a 12-week course in karma and probably come out of it feeling a little bit more knowledgeable of it. But you may not be completely satisfied. I mean, that's just,
I think it's most helpful to think of karma as right now. And don't think about the short term, super long, like where did this karma come from? Like, I've been a really nice person and all of a sudden I have cancer. And like, well, how did that happen? Like, that's not fair. And that's the kind of stuff that's so deeply hidden that you're not gonna know it, and you have to own up to it and say, okay, let's put these other teachings into practice and see what happens. Like, I'm just gonna focus on giving, and I'm gonna start giving. In my past experience, it was chocolate.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna intentionally give it away every day, all day long. And it worked. Like,
or skincare.
I'm not sure my wife would own a successful bakery if I hadn't given away chocolate with intention. Like, you gotta play with it, and it's really important to play with it because you have to see, like, the deeply hidden stuff. You're just not gonna get until you're enlightened. But you can get enlightened by living ethically and morally and basically following the 6 perfections.
Yeah. You do have to play with it. I agree. I think that it's something where you have to test it and see if it works for you. I mean, really, and get a sense of it. Does it add value to your life, even thinking about it and considering it? Does it help at all? Is it making just even baseline, like, is it making you happier? Because if it's not, then don't do it. I mean, really, like, why would you do something that, like, everyone else is, jumping on the bandwagon, or I don't know everyone else, but we are, some of us are, right? And if it's not working for you, then I would just toss it out. I don't think it's fair, it's going to be something where you have to really spend time and take a look at it and see if it applies and makes sense, and put time into it and be consistent with it and see what that does. And see if it makes sense to you.
Because I guess, like, it almost makes me wonder, like, I don't know if I'm thinking of it incorrectly, but it almost makes me think as karma as a self-existent object.
Yes, that actually is a very an excellent question. I actually have a lot of questions or opinions about that. And I also think it's sometimes the way it's portrayed and presented. Because I do sometimes think that it's presented in a way where karma does almost seem self-existent, and it's not. It's empty.
Right.
And and also it's presented in a way sometimes where it's overly simplified, and it's not. I mean, we have these terms that we talk about to get the general concept of it, like it's a seed. If you plant a lemon seed, you're gonna get a lemon plant. Okay, I get it, right? It grows, of course, it expands. Yes, we get that, right? But it sometimes is presented in a way where it is, it does seem self-existent, and it's not. And that's good that we're picking up on that, because it's not. And it shouldn't be portrayed that way, I don't think. Sometimes I think it is for different reasons, for different capacities. Yeah, I have issues with that too, just personally as a practitioner. It does get portrayed that way. And I think that creates more problems. And I think that when we hear people say things like, well, that's your karma, it's like, dude, you don't even get it. Just don't. I mean, that's how I feel. You don't. That's just, it's not that simple, right? So find your own process of understanding that. These teachings are fundamental foundational elements for you to start the practice. They are building blocks. This is not the end by even stretch of the imagination. It is barely the tip of the iceberg, okay? So it is important that each one of you take responsibility and do your own practice. Like, my job is to present the content so that you have something to hold on to, but decide for yourself if it works for you. If it doesn't, don't do it. It doesn't make sense, really. I mean, I truly mean that. And I say that to myself all the time. Like, there are moments where I'm like, I'm gonna test this out and see if this works. Or I go to a teaching, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go back and sit with this and see if it makes sense. It's your life. I mean, that's the thing about this practice. The thing that sucks, in a way, is that there isn't an omniscient being in this philosophy that rules everything. It would kind of be better that way, because then he can just own up to all the shit that happens in our lives. Fact is in this practice, it's on you to decide how you're going to live it. It's no one else's responsibility. And so it's very important that you get an intimate understanding for yourself within your own capacity. There's a lot of times too, and I've talked about this in class, where we do Lamaism. The teacher's gonna the teacher's not self-existent either. This is about you and your individual practice. So take time and sit there and struggle with it. And that's why we time, I don't say all the time, but it's been said all the time, where you're supposed to cook it. And it's true, like, you sit, and that's why we talk about going to retreats are not to just like feel good about yourself, okay? It's not to have like a cleanse and to like help and be a diuretic. It's not like that. It's there so that you can actually get some sense, have some sense, and get in tune with yourself and understand what is really going on. Group retreats are great, but I'm a huge advocate for also doing personal. I see tons of practitioners who do a ton of group retreats, and it's like, you only get so far. You know, you think this room was quiet by yourself. Imagine being in a cabin with no one around you for 1 month with no electricity sitting up there. You know what I mean? With like nothing. I mean, seriously, it's a whole different game. You know, you really get a sense of what's going on in your mind, what you smell like. You get a sense, I mean, really, what's happening, what are the weird thoughts that start to come in that you didn't even realize. I mean, you think your mind is noisy now, imagine being in a cabin by yourself, you know? So yeah, be intimate with this and sit with it and struggle with it. And don't let anybody dissuade you from that. Just be like, it doesn't make sense. Great, grind on that and work on that and test it and see.
And just one simple line for me that's been helpful along that line, I get from one of my teachers. Is it a useful thought? Does it help you live in the here and now? If it helps you live in the here and now, believe it. If it doesn't help you live in the here and now, don't believe it.
Yeah.
Like, I used to believe in reincarnation. Currently I don't, because it doesn't help me live here now.
Yeah.
It used to keep me up. And so I just gave it up.
Yeah.
So for me, and karma, if it doesn't work for you, like help you live now, it's not a useful belief. Let go of it. Find the beliefs that help you live now.
Yeah.
And so that's been the process of it working. Talking
Yeah.
around the sentence, but since I had that line, it's helped
Totally.
me streamline my thinking a whole lot.
Yeah.
So I'm a lot more better at mixed to getting
Yeah.
better and better. The ultimate stage, I'm starting to get glimpses of finally.
Yeah.
It's just being feelingly present and letting go of my thinking.
Yeah.
But that just terrified me to stop thinking. Because my mind would just,
Totally.
I'd have to, whenever my mind would stop, I'd just freak out.
Yeah.
How do I get it thinking again? I'd go
Yeah.
down with the silence. But now as the loving intentions are growing, I can occasionally be silent, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
But I'm still not gonna stay there, but
Yeah.
I'm glimpsing that now. And it's all part of that, what's a useful belief.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And like, we've said this in class, you know, like, if there are certain concepts it's not working, table it. Like, just put it on the shelf and say, okay, that I don't know. I can't figure it out. I don't understand why that's happening, or I don't understand that behavior. Table it. And work with what you do know that makes sense. That's gonna help you today. Because that's the thing, like, this stuff has to be tactical. It can't be theoretical. That's why I'm always like, guys, go out and start practicing this stuff. Apply it and come back and be like, hey, Jee, just so you know, I just applied those 3 different steps and it didn't work. Great, let's talk about that. You know, that's where it gets real, right? It's where it really starts to get a sense of, is this even useful for you or not? You know, yeah.
I was gonna share one of the things that like got me excited, or I don't know, where I came to a place with karma, was that it was really helpful for me to hear that teaching that like Geshe-la gives, or I don't know if it's long or written, about like the general different worldviews and how there's like, if there was a creator God, or if all things were random, or all things are caused. And first of all, when I heard that, it like totally hit home with like some questions I had about like the creator God thing. And then it just was like, oh, well, the other, and it's not just like there's only three. But when I really think about the other things that I've heard in terms of options for why my world is the way it is, like they really experientially didn't make sense to me. So that's when I was like, at least I'll try the karma thing because it's the only one that logically made any sense.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Good. It's good. It's good you're thinking about it. I like it. That took me almost 10 years to ask that question about karma and the self-existence of it. So it's good. Nice.
Sashi Puki Jushin Neto Tram Rira Blikshi Nyende Kempali Sange Shindu Nikte Luargi Prokun Namda Shimla Truparsho Yam Guru Ratnamandala Kandayatayami Gewati Gewokun Sinam Yeshe Sutsoshin Sinam Yeshe Lechungwe Tampa Kuni Taparsho. Let's end with a dedication and rejoice. Take a moment and commend yourself for your efforts this evening. Think about how you made it a priority to come to class. The effort that was taken to walk over or get on a train or in a car. The effort that was taken to be able to stay focused, to stay present in the entire duration of the class. Don't take it lightly. Acknowledge that you've taken the time, that you've put your energy into it. That you came here for a reason, whatever that may be for you. Commend yourself for being here tonight. Think about why you came tonight. What it is that you're looking to find. And dedicate that to someone who you love. Someone who you think would also benefit from this knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.